Encountering strange creatures, Amarillo, Texas is the latest with their strange dogman sighting or chupacabra. I mean, we're told that there are no monsters. There are no real monsters. However, monster is also a matter of how you think, what you observe. Predator can be just about anything from a mountain lion to a wolf. Their hunger is overwhelming and their need to feed is something to consider. Blood feeders, I called them earlier. And, of course, earlier I talked about numerous reports and discoveries that indicate that there is, in fact, an active shadow biosphere that exists at the same time and dimension as the one we see and live in from day to day. And while scientists speculate that strange organisms which might be alien in nature exist on the planet, it isn't a very far jump to suggest that stranger things exist on the planet and that when you blow open the shadow biosphere, there lurks every monster and vile thing that no one wants to ever come in contact with. And one can elaborate on the shadow biosphere up until the point that scientists tell you that it opens the door for pablum, or religion tells you it's all buried in the abyss with Satan. But these creatures of twilight may no longer be just a myth, but a fact of our creation and quite possibly a fact of their existence among us. If you want to get biblical, if you look at the first chapter of Genesis, 26th verse, it said, God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So here is the origin and beginning of our frail human nature. Everything within creation itself, we're told, was made perfect, perfection in the eyes of the Creator. Every soul was created in light itself after the Creator's own express image. Man at this time was immortal and was a beautifully formed body. Therefore, Adam was formed by the finger of God, which is the Holy Spirit, whose figure or outward form was beautiful and proportioned as an angel, and whose voice, every sound, was the sweetness of harmony and music. It remained in the state of innocence in which he was formed. The weakness of mortal man in his depraved state would not have been able to bear the virtue and celestial shrillness of the voice. But when the serpent found man, and when he took man from the inspiration of God, all of the celestial harmony of the heavenly country, everything began to deteriorate. Everything began to fall apart. Everything from the plotting against God to the blight to creating man and making man as a beast. So the serpent, we're told, in antiquity tried to entangle man into disobedience to the command of the Creator. And we later learn of the fall of man and his disobedience. But from that story, there comes some vague and apocryphal writings that fill in the gaps that biblical prophets fail to explain. Now, none of this has been accepted as canon, and some may see it as blasphemy. But after the fall of man, there are apocryphal stories of how some of the descendants of Adam learned the craft of the darker side of creation. And man, being essentially created after the image of God, after that he rashly presumed to generate the image of God out of himself. However, that was guided by a certain monster, and we all know who that monster is. And from that generation, we have conceived a beast conjured from the darkness, hidden in the shadows. There's actually a book called The Book of the Laws of Pluto, which speaks of monstrous generations which are not produced according to the laws of nature, and it talks about the unholy union of mixed things and how through divine natural magic, there could be a generation of creatures that can shapeshift at will. The book speaks of strange spells and tinctures that can produce what are known as therianthropes. And people can say that there are no such things as vile beings, reptilian shapeshifters, or even werewolves. However, historical accounts are everywhere. I mean, if you look at the spies that go through the trips in Hebron, remember that story? They said that they saw, it was near Canaan, and they saw these giants who they said sounded like panthers. They were large. They ate human flesh. They had bones made of iron, and they were reported to have double rows of teeth and to be seen eating animals, women, and children. What kind of vile creatures were those? So the idea of man transforming or channeling a being, even an animal, has always been fascinating to me, because you look at magical ceremonies and seances. There are entities that have entered into human hosts, and they performed all sorts of fascinating feats. Recently, there have been numerous reports and discoveries that indicate that there is, in fact, an active shadow biosphere that exists in the same time and dimension as the one we're in now. And, of course, I talked about the paranormal and the parapsychological view of this. All of this is certainly worth looking into. I mean, scientists can speculate about strange organisms. Scientists can talk about aliens. And you can suppose that by some quantum joke, science can bait us with dimensional theories that point to the possibility that there are areas of the planet where the veil is thinner, or that there is some extra dimensional vortex where a second genesis occurred parallel to our own. And there are locations throughout the planet that are suggested to be the most powerful due to their position, and with the appropriate ritual performed, you can see something come out of the planet. And, of course, we're seeing strange creatures showing up in Newsweek in Amarillo, Texas. And I think, it like I said, it's very interesting. And especially, we know that people have paranormal experiences. We know that they see monsters. We know that beasts show up that have never been seen before. And now we have government confirmation of things like alien abductions and possible extraterrestrial encounters. They've been talking about this. Now NASA wants to investigate UFOs and abductions. This is not limited to outer space. This is interdimensional. This is all interdimensional realms, which goes full circle into the possibility of the upside down spoken of in Stranger Things. And there are other non-fictional stories and programs that are using this as a focus of the storytelling. Like, for example, Outer Range, I mentioned, about a Montana ranch. They have a dimensional hole hidden on their property. And then, of course, Night Sky with Sissy Spacek, J.K. Simmons. They're in this show, probability of dimensional doorways sprinkled throughout the world. But the thing about Stranger Things, it's based on Cold War experiments that allegedly took place at Montauk. And, yes, creatures and monsters that look like dogs and wolves and half man, half wolf have showed up on the shores near Montauk and Plum Island, which is another story entirely. Some very creepy stories that we can get to, hopefully, with time, but also some phone calls.